Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you some tips for starting up Granblue Fantasy Relink. I have been obsessed with this game since its demo and now especially since its release, and I've just picked up a few nuggets of information that I think could be useful. Now this isn't everything I could possibly tell you as a tip, but I don't want to overload you if you're just getting started. So without further ado, let's get going. Now, some of these tips are going to be really simple because, quite frankly, I just don't see a lot of it when I do quick quests or any general online play. For example, if you are struggling to dodge attacks, and I cannot stress this enough, don't forget that you have a block. Straight up in the highest difficulty, I can invalidate entire mechanics just with a well-timed block. Even if it's not a perfect block, just regular hold L1 and it's gonna block the attack. Getting used to it early can really help. And while yes, you're probably gonna find some attacks that break your block and it doesn't work out, you need to discover these things for the character and playstyle that you're going for. So it's best to at least get used to it in some capacity. Another early game tip is to do the crab quests as you play through. There's these little collectibles called wee pincers, and while in the late game they're not that useful, they are useful as you're playing through the game and through the story initially. Every crab you collect will empower the sigil you get for the quests in the very first town by adding to its attack value. It can basically be one of the only attack sigils that you actually wear throughout the entire game. And while again, it won't be useful in the late game, that extra, 5, 10, 100, 400 attack power throughout the early to mid game definitely at least frees up some other sigil slots, and that's just nice. Also, if you're planning on playing largely solo and not going online, then please don't ignore your AI allies. It is a lot harder to clear some of the later content with your AI allies because you've probably been ignoring them through most of the game. And I know it's tempting. You just want to empower your main character. And quite frankly, if you're playing largely online, then that works out. I mean, you can funnel everything into that one character and rely on online to get missions. But sometimes you may not want to wait for a mission. Sometimes you may just want to chill out and play alone. And if your AI are weak, then that's going to be a problem. And you really need to give them the same level of attention that you give your main character for it to be, well, kind of fair going into certain missions. Now that means you're probably worried about mastery points, right? There are several ways to farm mastery points that you'll unlock kind of in the later part of the mid game. There's some side quest turn-ins, and the general ones can help with mastery points a lot as you play through the story. But as you get into the maniac difficulty, there's actually going to be ones that seemingly repeat on accident. So this may not be advice that works forever. Essentially, there's quests that ask you to turn in shards, and if you go into your Lyria's journal and then back out after you've handed in the quest, some of them will just respawn. And that means you can farm them over and over again if you actually have spare shards, or if you want to even go out and farm shards. And there's videos for that all over YouTube. Speaking of Lyria's journal, don't forget to go in there. There's basically in-game achievements / trophies that most of them just give you like a title to use online, but a lot of them give some rewards. And it's usually nothing major. There are some pretty hefty ones in there that are worth grabbing, but you'll worry about those late down the line. But the extra materials and the sigils and whatnot, it's good to collect them on occasion. Now, people have been asking me for crewmate recommendations if they're playing with AI. Honestly, with AI, it's a bit of a tough time because ones that should theoretically be good sometimes struggle with really basic features, and ones that you may not otherwise consider end up being a little bit better than you might expect. I ended up running with the MC as a debuffer, main reason being they're forced into the story throughout the actual, initial however many chapters. And so they're already leveled, you've probably put some resources into them, so it's kind of a freebie when it comes to, upgrading them. I also grabbed Vayne as a tank, gave him Provoke, and just made sure that he could eat all of the hits while I, as the player, just dive into the enemies that I'm fighting. And then finally, I went with Cagliostro, who's really good at giving you some buffs and heals and has all sorts of utility. I largely didn't give them too many damage skills until the higher difficulties, where you're really going to have to stop giving them all tons of utility and give them some opportunity to actually deal damage. You could also go with like Fairy or Vasaraga, those are other really good options, but I'd recommend unlocking as few crewmates as possible throughout the game, and I'll talk about that a little bit later down the line. Another really basic one that I get asked a lot when I'm streaming is if it's worth leveling up multiple weapons, because there is a weapon mastery tree that you will unlock for each of the characters. Yes, you want to level as many weapons as possible because the weapon masteries in your character mastery sheet are permanent across all of the weapons. So it doesn't matter what you have equipped, whatever you have bonuses in this menu right here, they'll count all the time. So the more weapons you level, the better off you'll be. Not to mention, for the game's ultimate weapons for each character, at least as of this video, you need to have all of those slots filled in to even finish that weapon. So you'd have to do it anyway, so you might as well do it. If you're looking for missions to actually farm fortitude shards, there's a couple of pretty popular ones. Some people have other preferences, but Great Goblins of Fire on the extreme difficulty and the double Griffin mission that comes from the Maniac difficulty are both really good. I think the Griffin mission is good if you can beat it quickly enough. It's worth nearly 30 fortitude shards, and with a pretty well-geared character, or especially a ranged character, that can be every like 2.5 minutes plus load times and result screens and stuff like that. Great Goblins of Fire are usually around the 2-minute mark, and a mix of fortitude shards, small, medium, large, but still pretty good overall, and you have access to it earlier. And since I mentioned masteries earlier, if you're looking for a mission that's really good for masteries, the best one comes when you unlock the Maniac difficulty. It's called Slime Pete, and it's just going to be an army of slimes. You're going to want a character that can mow through these pretty quick. I've used Narmaya with her cleave attack. I've used Rackham. I hear Eugen is quite good. Ranged characters that can activate and kill them while kind of just standing still all do very well. That's going to give you rupees. It's going to give you masteries. It's going to give you vouchers. It's going to give you everything. And not only that, but a prismatic slime can appear over on the north side of the room occasionally, which Vern will let you know if it does. And that gives you Damascus ingots, which lets you skip the material requirements on weapon upgrades. They also give you these Azurite gems, which allow you to upgrade sigils to the max immediately, whatever's available for their maximum level. It'll give you 10,000 mastery points, vouchers, 500 of them to boot. So yeah, this mission, it takes about 3 minutes, and it's well worth spamming if you need any or all of these things. Now, the last few that I have here are a little bit more advanced, I suppose. A big one is the use of Skybound Arts, which are the big attacks, when you team up with everybody and do this big hit. Everyone's always going for a full burst, but there's a lot of ways to use Skybound Arts, whether you're playing with your AI or you're playing with people online. One of the big things you can do with Skybound Arts, especially if you're playing with other actual people online, is do them right as a boss activates their overdrive gauge. If you have enough strength, you can use that singular Skybound Arts window to reduce the overdrive gauge to nothing and break them as soon as they get out, skipping any of those really long and annoying mechanics that you might have to deal with. It's also worth considering not doing a full burst, and instead breaking your Skybound Arts into groups of 2 and 2. Now with the AI, this doesn't really work. You're either going to have it set to hold and they'll go for a full burst, or you're going to have it set to auto, and then once everyone can do it, they'll do a full burst. But online, always consider the option depending on the opponent that you're up against, because you get a lot more uptime on them during something like an overdrive or near the end of their HP bar by running 2 sets of 2, since it runs that little bit of a timer at the end of the second one, plus the animation of actually doing the burst itself. So just buys a ton of time. Also really good for things like delaying enraged style attacks. As you get into the higher difficulty, several bosses will have a, if you don't stop me from doing this, then the fight is over. It's an instant wipe DPS and DPS check in rage. So doing the 2 and 2, if you're struggling to get through that, can also be a major benefit. Then we have 2 of what I think are probably the biggest ones, or at least I have them written down as 2 separate ones. Everyone's been asking me what types of sigils to equip. People are wondering about crit, they're wondering about attack, HP, Aegis. I have some recommendations, and they're not as well varied as you might expect. One of the most inhibiting stats in all of Granblue Relink is damage cap. You may notice that all of your attacks at some point are just dealing the exact same amount of damage. What that means is you are currently damage capped. Every individual attack, whether it be your normal attack or a skill, has its own set damage cap. And the only way to break that cap is to actually get more damage cap stat on any one of the number of things, your overmasteries, your weapon, your right stone, or your sigils. It doesn't matter. You need damage cap. It's so easy to hit the amount of attack you need to hit damage cap that you'll almost completely abandon attack sigils. Not completely, but almost completely, as you actually get towards the end of the gearing process. So you need 4 damage cap sigils by the time you reach endgame. Heck, I'm not gonna lie, you really need to hit max level damage cap more than anything else, and it goes all the way up to level 65, plus there's other effects that you can get that stack on top of that. So damage cap is the #1 stat you're aiming for with Sigils. However, it's not really the only stat. You also have some of the safer things, which are really good as you're getting into the highest difficulty fights if it's your first time doing them. The number of people I've run into online that go into proud difficulty encounters and don't have something like Guts or Auto Revive or Potion Hoarder, all of which can prevent death, prevent your teammates from having to resurrect you from death, or even be used as a healing utility or a self-res utility. All of those things are fantastic. If you need to slot them individually, that's okay. If you can find sigils that have them as a secondary, or if you can get these effects on right stones, having them even just a few points in is better than not having them at all in most cases. Once you overgear and can destroy a fight in a matter of a minute, you probably won't want or need these things nearly as much. But if you're newer, highly consider them as you go into the higher difficulties. Now, the other sigil recommendations I have are kind of quirky. You're going to eventually start earning a currency called curios. They're basically boxes that can be appraised once you get to a certain point in the game. And there are a few sigils, more than a few, that come from strictly curios. There's no way to get them in any other part of the game. Among them is a sigil called War Elemental, which causes all of your damage to gain an elemental advantage. Now, it's currently working on enemies that have plain elements, meaning that they don't really have anything that they're weak against. And that's not deliberate. It's probably a bug that will be fixed, but on anything that has an elemental weakness, War Elemental will likely be a mainstay, and it is rare. I've opened nearly 1,000 curios, and I still don't have a single War Elemental, so that's a big one. There's also things like Glass Cannon, which can be used as kind of a meme, but in more serious scenarios where you're killing things super fast, highly consider Glass Cannon, potentially paired with Potent Greens, and of course, Supplementary Damage, which can just add 20% more damage on top of all of your attacks if you can manage to get enough of them. It is really intense, and there's a lot of sigil slots that are automatically taken up by a lot of this stuff. There's also character exclusive sigils, and you might be able to roll a double on them once you get late enough into the game, giving you both character passives in a single sigil. These are all things you're going to have to work to get over time. Don't stress if you don't have them. They're far from mandatory to get through all the content in the game. But if you're someone who's preparing for future updates, it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for these things and putting them at the top of your priority list. So I had all of that as one topic, so you're probably wondering what the other topic is. And it's one that's kind of weird to tell people. A lot of people are really excited about unlocking various crewmates as you play throughout the game. You earn several crewmate cards from playing through the main story, and several others from doing the Alliance Board quests. There's even one that's gotten from doing some online co-op via the Gold Dahlia badges. I'm here to tell you, don't unlock crewmates unnecessarily early on unless you're absolutely certain that you'll play them or they're going to go to your AIs. Now, there's two reasons for this. The first reason is the later that you unlock crewmates, the higher level they'll start as, and with more masteries. Unlocking them when you get to the Maniac difficulty will start them all at level 60 with over 60% of their masteries already learned. That saves a ton of mastery points, which, to be fair, you can farm very quickly and don't need to actually worry about, but it just saves you time. And if you're already working with a functional party, there's no reason to just go unlock them willy-nilly. Now, the second reason was one that I benefited from because I didn't unlock crewmates, and it was largely for that first reason. But the second reason is that the very final boss on Proud Mode can drop a random weapon based on who you have recruited. The more characters you have unlocked, the more characters you have a chance of getting a weapon for. But if you're trying to get a weapon for your one particular main, it is essentially diluting the pool. Now, if you're like me, I farmed all of the weapons, so in the end, it didn't really matter. But initially, it wasn't until my 8th weapon that I got my main character's weapon, and that can be mildly frustrating. It's a little easier to get your own weapon first and then go back and get the rest than it is to wait to see your weapon over and over again. And with only about a 10, maybe 15% drop rate, you can go a really long time without seeing these if you're really unlucky. Me, who went nearly 30 runs without finding a single weapon. Anyway, those are a couple of reasons to not just unlock the crewmates willy-nilly. Now, honestly, I have a whole ton of other pieces of advice that I'd like to give you, but a lot of them are pretty spoilery. There's specific boss things that you can do that can make your life a whole lot easier. This includes with the mission to unlock Proud Mode, as well as that very final boss that I mentioned, avoiding a lot of deaths and saving a lot of time. Those will have to be a different video, one that's a little bit more spoiler, well, willing to spoiler. This one's relatively spoiler free. So hopefully you found this information useful. Be sure to like and subscribe. We got more Granblue videos coming on the channel, though I'd like to remind you this is not a Granblue exclusive channel. Just so happens that when I made this channel, I became really obsessed with this game at the same time. Anyway, with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.